Hey guys, found out the reason why my camera wasn't working before. Apparently, when it blinks red, that means there's improper voltage to actually charge the battery. But when it stays red, that means it's actually charging. It doesn't even turn green when it's reached 100%. It just stops. They couldn't figure out what color they wanted, so they just chose red. What about all those like colorblind people? You have traffic lights, right? And traffic lights have red, orange, green. And most of those colors, a majority of those colors, 2 out of 3 of those colors will not be seen by the colorblind person.
For the camera thing, we're gonna decide to use red to ensure that the colorblind people won't see it.
I'm not colorblind, I just empathize. It's a problem. We're going to establish the road to proper camera chargers that will actually be interpretable by most of humanity. It's going to change our lifetime, our generation. My gen is going to be advanced. Sorry for my little rant there. We're actually going to talk about something a little more important. Before you watch this video, just take a glance at Proverbs 3, and that's what we're going to be studying today. There's probably someone in your life who truly cares about your well-being. I think Solomon in this chapter is the epitome of a caring father. You can almost imagine him carrying a newborn baby in his arms, or anointing his son with oil as they would have done in those days. The passage kind of appears a bit of a blessing, maybe even a lullaby. But Solomon isn't passive in what he says. You'll see it's a list of commands to do this, to do that. He's not telling his son to be inactive, and he's not trying to put his son to sleep. He's trying to get his son to be active. I found that this passage had some great commands in it, and some surprising interjections. Let's take a look. This passage has a very normal list of commands at the start, and each have their own benefits or rewards. First, don't forget the teaching and keep the commandments, and it says this in verse 1. In verse 2, it says, then you will have prosperity. I think it's pretty clear what these things mean. If you live for the Lord, you will reap your reward.
That's a handy little rhyme to remember.
And it's not the reward we think we deserve, the physical things in our lives. No, it's much greater. I think in light of what the book of Proverbs has been teaching us, it actually means you will reap more wisdom. Through God's discipline, we'll become more wise. If we honor God, we might imitate Christ and become more wise. If we are not foolish in sin, we are wise in our righteousness. Christ's righteousness, to be exact. Notice a pattern. In our trust of the Lord and our acknowledgement of Him, we become more of the image of His Son, Jesus Christ. I want to remind you that this doesn't come just because we do the right things. It's the Spirit working in us to actually transform us to the image of Christ. We are still foolish in our sin. By the grace of God, Jesus bore all our sin. He has the wisdom of God that allowed us to imitate our Creator. So now we're on to point 2, the weird interjection, and this is found in verse 19 and 20. Now to me this was a kind of strange interjection, because we move from talking about commands, and then we talk about God as creating the world, and then we continue on to a list of commands. It seemed a little bit of a strange thing to put in. But in light of what I said above, I think it's really important that we see this. We are here and doing all this to imitate our Creator, informing the world in wisdom, or by wisdom founding the earth, as it says in verse 19. God was able to establish a wise order in all of creation, which means that creation right from the very beginning was wise. I think this creates a very interesting discussion on how the creation actually was right from the beginning. If creation had been created wise, then why did we fall into sin? We decided we wanted to become more like God, and we forgot that the very state we were in was good. God said it is good. I won't continue on this side note for too long. Notice how following wisdom returns to the very wise order that God had established in creation right from the beginning, and we imitate our Creator in doing that. I think that's so cool. So point 3, the poem about wisdom. Here's a little lullaby and a song for you. And it's not rockabye baby. This little section is actually a poem that begins and ends with the word blessed. And everything good springs from wisdom. She, personified, is better than gain from silver or profit from gold in verse 14. She's more precious than jewels in verse 15. Wisdom is something worth having, and we already established this last week when we talked about the value of wisdom. And by this very same wisdom, God established the world, which we talked about in point 2. How amazing is it? 4. We see more commands in verse 21 to 31 that Solomon is writing down for his son. The first command is seen in verse 21 to 24. Keep sound wisdom, and you will sleep peacefully and not stumble. Interestingly, in Leviticus 26 verse 6, God says a very similar thing to his people. I will give you peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. This whole thing was part of God's covenant to the Israelites, somewhat conditional on their obedience to him. Whilst Proverbs is a collection of ideals and generalizations, it's important to me that God does work in this way. Also, I think it's important that this command is another one with a blessing. But other commands follow this afterwards, ones with that I would call negative imperatives, do not commands. Do you see that pretty much all of them tell us to love our neighbor? For pretty much all of them, if we don't follow them, there's curse rather than blessing. Verse 32, it says, "For the devious person is an abomination to the Lord." The way in which we interact with each other is very important to God, much like how we might interact with him. As I said, this passage is a bunch of commands with some interjections within it. And so it makes it very difficult to sum up the entire chapter. I don't really wish to make meaning of the way Solomon has pieced his argument together. It's a little more conversational, a bit poetic, and a bit more practical in some areas of the chapter. But one thing really stands out to me. There is a standard to which we should live, which we fail to live, but God still calls us to live. God created this world in wisdom. We chose not to live according to that wisdom. He is calling us to accept this wisdom, which came in the form of his Son, Jesus Christ. If we accept, we will be continually transformed to the image of this wisdom and become more wise every day. You might be sick of the word wisdom. If so, please exit to the nearest bathroom. And you might even get sick of wisdom after a few more, to be exact, 28 days of this. But if you are truly a believer, you won't get sick of becoming increasingly wise every day. Many of the Proverbs are just generalizations, things that are most likely true. But as this chapter points out, God's discipline can come upon those whom he loves. Sometimes even when we do the right thing, God will take us through the test, because that test is what's going to be good for us and help us to become more wise. Wisdom is not always easily gained. Sometimes really hard things have to happen for us to become transformed and become more wise. But this is not to discourage you from joining the side of wisdom. Don't be scared of the force. Control the force. At the end of this passage, in verse 33 to 35, Solomon points out a few things. Wicked are cursed, scorned, and disgraced. The righteous are blessed, honored, and favored. Wicked will always face punishment. Their way is never good. The righteous might have a terrible life on this earth, but in wisdom, they fear God and they trust in him, and they have a hope that is waiting for us outside the realm of this earth. Just trust in that, and trust in God and lean on him. Thanks for joining us for another hashtag 31 Days of Proverbs video. I'm glad that my camera is now working. I hope the Lord's words and my words of encouragement have been of some help to you. I pray that the Spirit will continue to work in your life to become more like the image of the Son and the image of the Creator who established this world in wisdom. And remember to charge your batteries and not get deceived by the red flashing light. Okay, bye-bye.